So just because you've got agreement doesn't actually mean that you have a contract or a legally binding agreement. What separates a contract or a legally binding agreement just from two people agreeing or, say, a promise? One of the key factors is this second requirement, which is intention. Did you actually intend to make an agreement that would have legal ramifications? So that's our second requirement that we need to get a simple apparent contract. To work out whether there is intention, the courts use a method where they look at what the parties are doing, how they're behaving, and say to themselves, look, would an objective person, was an outsider, actually believe that these parties meant for their agreement to be legally binding? Now, the law at the moment doesn't follow exactly the traditional approach, but this still has a heavy weight, which is why we approach it this way. So traditionally, the way the courts have looked at intent is that they make two key presumptions, both of which are rebuttable. So it's important, really important, to know these presumptions around intention. So these two presumptions are that when an agreement is of a non-commercial nature, that is when it's a social or domestic agreement, then the presumption is that the parties do not intend to be legally bound. So if you make an agreement to meet a friend, a relative for a cup of coffee, you have agreement you'll meet for coffee, but it's a social or domestic agreement, so you really don't intend to be able to be sued if you don't turn up for the cup of coffee. Okay, so you get the idea? Social or domestic, presumption, no legal implications. And then there's the reverse presumption, okay? The other presumption is that if it is a commercial arrangement, then it is presumed that the parties did intend to create legal relations. I mean, that's why we have legal relations in the commercial world. So those two presumptions really do make a lot of sense. The other thing to note, and what the next video will do, we'll go through some cases to provide examples about how these are rebuttable. All that means is just because it's social or domestic doesn't necessarily mean that they always have no legal implications. We need to look at what goes on, that there may be some other factors in there that say, you know what, despite this being a social or domestic arrangement, they did intend to have legal relations. And vice versa. Some non-commercial agreements aren't intended to have legal implications. And that's what we're going to do in the next video, where we look at the cases.